You're the child of the infertile hag, probably disabled lol. 4 years ago, I divorced my husband, and I coincidentally ran into him. He was arm in arm with a young woman walking near the station. Although I never wanted to see him again, there was no avoiding it. I couldn't escape, holding my 3-year-old son's hand. Is that my kid? I told you not to have it, but you did. It's none of your business anymore, right? Certainly not. I don't plan on acknowledging him as my child. Don't bother me. What a horrible man he was. I truly felt relieved to have parted ways with him. However, the woman next to my ex-husband had been acting strange for a while. Pale-faced and with trembling lips, she muttered with fear, "That child is." What turbulent events would follow for me and my son after that? I'm Natalie, a 46-year-old company employee. I now live with my 3-year-old son, Morgan. Despite giving birth at 43, an advanced maternal age, my son has grown up healthy, and I couldn't be happier. I am deeply grateful to have had this child. The real father of this child actually insisted I abort when I found out I was pregnant. Those were truly painful and difficult days. I reflected on those hellish days. I was once a secretary to a company president after graduating from college. Modestly speaking, I was skilled at being considerate, greatly valued by the president. That's when I met Sean, the president's son. That's when Sean set his sights on me. Natalie, it was love at first sight. Please marry me. Sean, though raised as a rich kid and somewhat unreliable, touched my maternal instincts, so I agreed to marry him. My Phil, who already liked me, quickly approved of the marriage. If Sean marries someone responsible like you, Natalie, he might mature a bit. I'm really glad. Natalie, I'm counting on you. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. Since Sean wanted me to support him at home, I quit my job and became a housewife. I'm the only son, so I plan to take over my father's company eventually. I hope you will support me. Okay. I'll support you wholeheartedly. My relationship with the in-laws was great, and we started living with them right after marriage. However, my Mill's poor health meant she needed extra care. My Phil was very kind to her, and we admired them, hoping to be like them. That dream didn't come true. My Phil was a wealthy man, and there was also an elderly live-in helper named Cassandra. Cassandra and I took care of household chores together. Cassandra was also a nice person, and we all lived together, helping each other like a real family. Natalie, thank you always. Since I only had one son, I'm so happy you're like a real daughter to me. Thank you. Since my parents passed away early, I'm grateful for how kind you and father are to me. My parents died in an accident, so I was raised by my grandparents. However, my grandparents passed away before my job hunting began, so I was truly fortunate to have met these in-laws. My married life was smooth, but Sean's work wasn't going well. Although he intended to take over the company, my Phil felt Sean lacked the ability to manage it. Hence, my Phil was harsh when guiding Sean. Dad never trusts me. He's not retiring anytime soon. As long as he's around, I can't become the president, Sean complained discontentedly. A few years later, clouds of anxiety began to loom over my married life. Even after 5 years of marriage, we couldn't have children. Sean blamed me. Why can't you have kids? All my friends had them right after marriage. It's embarrassing not to have any. That's not fair. Blaming me without any evidence is ridiculous, isn't it? There's no way it's my fault. It's definitely yours. It's just impossible to talk. He arbitrarily decided that infertility was my fault. While my husband continued in this manner, my in-laws never pushed us about having children. I could see that they cared about me. Even my in-laws surely wanted grandchildren, but, sorry, we still can't give you any grandchildren. What are you saying? It's not your fault, Natalie. Exactly. Children are a blessing, and it's okay if we can't have them. Having you around is enough. My in-laws said that, but I also wanted children, and I started considering infertility treatment to give my in-laws grandchildren. Despite that, I managed to convince my husband to accompany me to the hospital for tests. As a result, it turned out that my fallopian tubes were prone to blockages, making it difficult for me to conceive. See, it turns out it was your fault after all. Marrying you was a mistake. I feel like I got the short end of the stick. It's just so frustrating. My husband blamed me, but it turned out he also had difficulties conceiving. We found out that he had a low sperm count and poor sperm motility. What? No way. However, since it wasn't impossible for us to conceive, the doctor advised us to continue treatment. I thought about continuing treatment, but my husband didn't want to. I don't want to undergo that treatment. Just because we can't have kids doesn't mean we have to. After that, more than 10 years passed without us having children. My husband stopped mentioning wanting children. Our relationship with the in-laws was good, but my relationship with my husband became strained. My husband's work kept him out late, drinking and returning home late at night. With many failures at work, he was scolded by his father, the company president, and was always in a bad mood. "It's because you're not supporting me as my wife," he would lash out at me. Amidst all this, at the age of 43, I miraculously became pregnant. I was so happy and teary-eyed, thinking that enduring the painful infertility treatment was worth it. I thought my husband would be pleased, but his reaction was unexpected. "Hey, be happy. I'm pregnant. It's too late for that now." Huh. Aren't you happy? Do you even realize how old you are? You're a 43-year-old hag. Don't you know there are risks with late pregnancies? What do you mean? It means the child might have disabilities. Just abort it. I decided to marry a young woman without such risks. Let's divorce. I'll pay you alimony. What? I decided to marry a young woman without such risks. So, let's get divorced. I'll give you some compensation. What a cruel thing to say. I felt like I was being pushed from heaven to hell. I couldn't stand it anymore, so I packed my bags and decided to leave the house. But before that, I had to say goodbye to my in-laws. They were both surprised by this sudden turn of events. They urged me to stay to give birth to the child, but my life with my husband had hit its limit. I left, determined to shake off my in-laws' attempts to stop me. Afterward, I received some compensation, signed and submitted the divorce papers, changed my phone number, and cut ties with my in-laws. I heard that my husband plans to remarry the company president's new secretary he recently hired. It doesn't really matter anymore, but it seems my husband is fond of the new secretary. If his new wife catches sight of me, she probably won't be pleased. I gave birth to a child on my own. A cute little boy. Raising him alone was tough, but my child was so precious, nothing could replace him. One day, when my child turned 3, I unexpectedly ran into my ex-husband at the station. "Is that you, Natalie?" I had a bad feeling when I heard this voice that I recognized. I tightly squeezed the hand of my son, Morgan, who was holding mine. My ex-husband, upon seeing Morgan, laughed and said, "You're the child of the infertile hag, probably disabled, lol." He was walking arm in arm with a young woman. Could she be his new spouse? I never wanted to see my ex-husband again, but I had no choice. I couldn't just leave with my 3-year-old son. "Is that my kid? I told you not to have it, but you did. It's none of your business anymore, is it?" "Certainly not. I don't plan on acknowledging him as my child. Don't bother me." He was such a cruel man, and I sincerely felt relieved to have parted ways with him. However, the woman next to my ex-husband had been acting strange for a while. She had a pale face and trembling lips. Fearfully, she muttered, "Is that child Sean's?" Then, she whispered something in my ex-husband's ear. I couldn't hear her well, but faintly caught the words "Phil's fortune." After murmuring what, Sean's eyes widened like saucers as he stared intently at my son. Then, he glared at me sharply and shouted, "You're already an outsider. Don't ever come near my parents' house. Never." And with that, they both ran off in front of me as if trying to escape from something. What on earth could this mean? I have no idea whatsoever. But there must be some secret in my in-laws' house if I'm being told never to approach it. Curious about my husband's and the woman's reactions, I decided to head to my in-laws' house, the first time in 4 years. The housemaid, Cassandra, greeted me tearfully, saying, "Welcome back, Mrs. Natalie. My Mill passed away 2 years ago, and my Phil is said to be bedridden due to illness." Upon seeing me suddenly, my Phil was delighted. However, he looked worn out, with a pale complexion, and seemed quite unwell. "Natalie, it's good of you to come. I've been searching for you for so long. Father, it's been a while. I apologize for not keeping in touch. Who's this child? This is Morgan. He'll be 3 years old soon. You gave birth to Sean's child, huh? I nodded in agreement. My Phil affectionately patted Morgan's head. Then, he handed me a certain business card, instructing me to go to this place. It was the lawyer my Phil was close to. Following my FIL's instructions, I visited the lawyer and was shocked by the truth I was told. 2 months later, I received a call from the housemaid, Cassandra, from my in-laws' house. My Phil had passed away. She also told me something intriguing. 3 days later, dressed in mourning attire, I headed to the funeral hall with my son. The funeral was already underway, with my ex-husband giving the eulogy. The young woman I had met recently was by his side. Although my father has passed away, I will take over the company and protect it with all my might. I will also build a family with Miley, who was my father's secretary. Thank you for all your support. Without showing any tears, he spoke confidently as if giving a speech. During the eulogy, Sean noticed me and my son and shouted in surprise, "Natalie, what are you doing here? Get out. This isn't the place for you to come." Sean tried to order his subordinates to drag me out of the funeral hall. Despite bringing my son Morgan along, I felt angered by his rude treatment toward his own son. But I couldn't resist being pulled by several men. The mourners were surprised and murmuring, "All eyes on us. Everyone, please be quiet." Someone stopped a commotion. It was the lawyer who had been taking care of my Phil for many years. "There's a will that the late president wanted to announce at the funeral." "Stop it. We already know without you saying it. As his only son, I'll inherit everything." Despite Sean's attempts to stop him, the lawyer began reading the contents of the will. The contents were shocking. The company would be handed over to the vice president, who had worked hand in hand with the president to expand the company. Since Sean lacked the talent for management, he was to work under the vice president. Regarding his assets, in the event of a child being born to his ex-wife, me, everything would be bequeathed to that child, with me appointed as the guardian. Since I had already heard everything from the lawyer beforehand, I wasn't surprised, but the mourners were in an uproar. Sean's fiancée also bit her lip, her eyes wide with confusion. She had been the secretary to my father-in-law, so she seemed to have known the contents of the will somehow. That's why she was surprised when she first saw Morgan, thinking that he would inherit the assets. What will happen to me? It doesn't concern someone who's going to end up behind bars. Huh? What are you talking about? I know why my Phil suddenly fell ill. Sean stared at me with a pale face. He glared at me with a fierce look. In fact, I had heard from the housemaid, Cassandra. She had seen Sean and his fiancée, Miley, putting flowers into my FIL's meal. Suspicious, she had secretly taken a photo with her phone. Cassandra sent me that photo, and when I looked it up online, I found out that the flowers had a high level of toxicity. They were a common sight, but both the stem and roots were poisonous, and drinking the water in which the flowers were arranged in could be fatal. That's a lie. They're just speculations. There's photo evidence and witnesses, so you can't deny it. Sean was cornered, desperately trying to think of a way out. Then, he started shouting, "It's not my fault, it's Miley. She tempted me into it." He actually tried to pin the blame on his fiancée. She started to panic. "You're the one who said, if my dad was still around, I wouldn't be able to become president, so please help me. You told me that you heard about Dad and the lawyer discussing handing over Natalie's son the inheritance, so I had no choice but to do something to Dad. It's your fault, don't blame me. You're the one who brought the poisonous flowers." The two of them confessed everything. In front of all the mourners, they admitted their guilt. Sean apologized to me and even groveled at my feet in a complete turnaround. "Natalie, I'm sorry. Please, you gotta tell everyone it's all a lie. If I get handed over to the cops, my life's over. Please." "It's too late for that. I've already submitted the evidence to the police. They should be coming soon." Leaving behind a crying Miley and a dumbfounded ex-husband, I left the scene. I could hear the sound of police cars approaching. I didn't want Morgan to see my miserable ex-husband anymore. Afterward, I heard that my ex-husband and Miley were taken away by the police. The crime of taking someone's life, especially one's own father, is serious, and since he hasn't shown any remorse at all, it'll probably be a long time before he gets out of prison. I bought a house in the suburbs with the inheritance I received from my Phil and now live there with my son. Having witnessed my ex-husband's blind pursuit of money, to the extent of even harming his own father, I'm determined to live a simple and modest life to avoid such a fate. I plan to continue working at the company as usual and raise my son with all the love I can give. Just watching my son grow up healthy and happy fills me with joy.